This is episode number 61. Today's episode is the audio from a recent sports business classroom webinar titled, Should the Final Four Impact an NBA Draft Board? With Eric Pincus and myself, Dan Purcell. In this episode, Eric and I cover the calendar of scouting, how the NCAA Tournament affects your draft board as a player evaluator. We'll cover my first lottery mock of 2022. And then we'll also cover what's our next step in the scouting process, going into the combine, workouts, interviews. And then finally, we'll talk a little more about Sports Business Classroom and how you can join.
This episode is brought to you by the Sports Business Classroom Business of Basketball Immersive Experience in Las Vegas. Taking place July 10th through the 15th during the Las Vegas Summer League, the Business of Basketball program is an immersive training and educational experience for the basketball leaders of the future. If you dream of working in basketball and want to take your basketball experience, knowledge, and network to the next level, this program was designed for you. Majors include the league salary cap, scouting, video and analytics, and media and broadcast. This is an amazing opportunity to invest in your future and a chance for you to prove that you have what it takes to work in the business of basketball. Listeners can find out more at sportsbusinessclassroom.com. That's sportsbusinessclassroom.com. And please note that space is limited and that this program will sell out. So if you're interested in taking your basketball career to the next level, head on over to sportsbusinessclassroom.com today.
I'm Eric Pincus, Dan Purcell. We're with Sports Business Classroom. I also write for Bleacher Report, and Dan is a longtime NBA operations expert, spent many, like a decade with the New Orleans Pelicans, and is bringing some of his wisdom for us today, specifically on the draft and preparing your board. And how does the tournament, now that we've gotten down to the Final Four, how does that impact your draft board? So we're going to get to all that. I do want to say before we dive in that if you are going to go to the Sports Business Classroom immersive program in Las Vegas, you've thought about doing it and you're probably going to go, but you haven't decided yet, decide now because there's a discount before April. If you can get it in March 31st, you're just going to save money. So go ahead and do it. It's going to sell out. You might as well lock it in early and save yourself some money. So we'll get into that more. We plan on having a surprise guest later on. And Dan, let's get right into it. How you doing today, Dan?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Hey everybody that's attending. Appreciate you taking your time out to hopefully learn something. Hopefully we can, expand your knowledge a little bit.
Well, you're really, to me, the knowledge here, because my expertise is more in salary cap. And what I always say when I go to Las Vegas and I teach is one of the drawbacks is I can't actually attend as a student and take like the scouting, video and analytics section, which is amazing. And you'll be a part of that. So I want to kind of pick your brain because I don't really watch a lot of college basketball, and I basically look at the tournament. I'm like, oh yeah, he looks good. And I know names, but I don't really know how this all fits in. So can you kind of at least tell everyone what you think? What is the general process of building a draft board? You obviously you can't start today, right? With, at the Final Four. You started earlier in the process. When did you start this?
For me, I started literally I would start the day before the last draft, if that makes any sense. That's when I started making my theory of, for next year, where we're at. Is actually the day before that current draft. So it was 366 days before the next draft that I would start curating. Of course, you're always picking up information along the way. You're doing Hoop Summit, you're doing those things. So you have guys that, it's not in a perfect science where it's, hey, I'm starting here and with 0 and moving forward. You know what I mean? So.
Right. And so you spend a whole year on this, and I guess there's only so much you can do until you start to see the players play. So around what time the season starts, I guess, do you see the players in action before the season? Like, does it start with McDonald's, All-American? Where are the key dates?
Yeah, McDonald's is one of them. Nike Hoop Summit, things like that. There's summer camps that go on in overseas, and there's foreign players, and there's a lot of layers to it, And yeah, you start there, you start younger, you start with things, and sometimes it's a lot of your network too that you start with. It's who's coming up next. Are there, if you know some guys and say, hey, who's coming up next in your area? Are you, is there a freshman or an eighth grader that's standing out? And, you just get an idea. You're not out there, right, just actively pursuing information on everybody, but you're just kind of putting things on the radar. And for me, I always tried to look 3 years out. So eighth graders and freshmen that are in high school, not going to their games, not doing anything like that, just talking and getting an idea of names, things, and then I'd write them down. I have a pretty organized calendar of, not just calendar, but organized list of guys coming, what year, and there's a lot of ranking sites as well you can start doing research on. So in essence, yes, I'm looking 3-4 drafts down the road all the time, but really for the next draft, I'm 366 days ahead.
Wow. And then they start playing. And so you're scouting year round. By the time we get to the tournament, what have you already accomplished? Like, do you already have a big board of the names, top 100, or how do you organize it?
Yeah, I usually go, there's different ways to, skin this cat, if you will. Right. And some guys go 100, some guys go 80, some guys go 60. I like 60. I like 60 just because it's a round number. I started off with 75. That's when I started learning my process. I think if anybody's listened to the podcast, talk about your process and what works for you and how you, get information, take information and, distribute it. I think that within my process, I was more or less saying, I want, I guess lack of a better term, I wanted 75 because I thought 75 was a good number because it gave me a 15 person or prospect overflow, if you will.
Right.
Maybe guys drop down, maybe guys, they get injured, there's a buffer zone in there of me being able to slot guys and move them forward. Right. And then honestly, I started looking at it going, it doesn't happen that often. If a guy gets injured and he's we'll just say he's projected in the next draft as a first rounder, most of the time he gets drafted. Like Edmund Sumner was a guy a few years ago. He hurt his knees and he got surgeries, multiples, and yet he still got drafted, so it wasn't like he had this awful injury and then he's just off the board. So for me, I like 60. I think 60 is a good number. I don't think you can go wrong with 75. I think 75 is okay. I think 100 is a little over because in terms of there's a lot of attrition there and there's a lot of, I start to get analysis paralysis at 100. It's like, oh my God, there's a lot of it. Almost gets overwhelming for me.
Right. Well, what's interesting also, is that there's a lot of activity the night of the draft, after the draft, where teams are going after the guys who didn't get drafted. So, there's a point where you want your top 60. And I guess you're probably chasing the ones in the 60 who didn't get drafted for your two ways, but having that buffer also kind of gives you that room for chasing because you have 2 slots. Each team has 2 slots for two ways. So you've prepared your mock. Are you at the conference tournaments looking? Is that kind of where you pretty much solidify it ahead of the NCAA tournament?
Yeah. For me, I like to know if I don't have a firm grasp on the person and the player by the end of the conference tournament, I need to start digging a lot more because I'm for some reason, whether it's just I was focused on different conferences or different players, or maybe he's a late riser, for me, I try to be by the conference tournament. I can say, these guys are my lottery guys. These guys are my first rounders. These guys are, sleepers. I love sleepers. I think they're great. But usually by the conference tournament, I'm feeling pretty good about everybody that I'm either assigned or I want to know about.
So you've got them pretty much. How many times do you need to see these players to kind of get that kind of solidification of who they are?
Yeah. Remember the first thing is don't draft a player. Like that's one of my cardinal rules. Don't draft a player you've never seen in person. No chance. None. That's why I think or at least never, sometimes it's not realistic for whoever is making the draft decision to know who the 60 and you have the 60th pick to go see it. That's not realistic. Sometimes it's why you have a good team. but at least never say, take this guy here. I've never seen him play. You know what I mean? I've never seen him play in person. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know that I could ever put my name on something I've never watched him. I've never watched him in person, and that happened with me, I didn't do a lot of Europe. So I was never a guy that was like, oh yeah, this European guy, this is the guy to take here at 52, like I was never that guy. So, yeah, I would say that's the cardinal rule of it is make sure you see him first. Right. And then, if it's a first round guy, I personally would always want to see him at least twice. I think twice is good. I prefer neutral and away games. I don't like home games. That's just me. That's the preference for me. I like road games, especially rivalry games. Something with a lot of pressure. Something that, not even pressure. Maybe it's just a different environment. And I think that's important to show what type of guy he is when he doesn't have the crowd on his back, and it's against him, because these are guys you're ultimately saying, we want you to help us. And when we're playing game 7 in the playoffs of whatever round, and we're on the road, we're in Dallas, Memphis, wherever, Portland, Portland gets pretty loud, you know what I mean? So it's you want somebody that you want to see where they're at in that process. Cause I'm always thinking worst case scenario is game 7 in a really loud building against a really good team, and we got to win. How are you going to perform? That's how my mentality is, especially with the first rounders.
That's a lot to project on like a 19, 20-year-old kid, but you still, that's the choice you're really forced to make, because you only get so many picks. Okay. So now the tournament has started. Mm-hmm. What is it that you're trying to get out of the tournament on these players that you've already more or less ranked in the top 60 or 75 list?
Yeah, maybe I'm a little boring, but the tournament actually doesn't do much for me. It's the one time of the year that I actually get to sit back and like enjoy the basketball. I enjoyed watching St. Peter's play.
Right.
I got to enjoy watching Carolina just start playing their best basketball of the year. Like just on a dime. Like it's so fun for me, the tournament, and when it comes to like the scouting part of it, projections of guys, analysis, it's more or less for me. It's almost like they have to prove me wrong now. You know what I mean? They've already proved themselves to me and who they are and what type of player they are and what they do. And it's almost like they have to prove themselves the opposite of that now.
Right. They basically, you have an idea of who they are, and if they don't deliver, now you're sort of having to reevaluate. How does, like, somebody like, Gonzaga was knocked out. They didn't get to the Final Four with Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, Auburn. How do these guys, do they get impacted negatively because it's a team sport? Maybe was it on them? Is it on the team? Is it on the coach? How does it impact the board?
That's you're not the first person that's asked me that question. And I think that's a very valid question. I think, did it affect Kevin Durant? Like, think about it that way. Kevin Durant didn't win a title. He didn't get to the Final Four, but yet he's the second pick in the draft, arguably top 10 player in history. But is anybody even going back to his college and saying his college days and going, oh man, he didn't win that title. He didn't get to the Final Four. He didn't get to I think they got to the Sweet 16 that year. So to me, if the talent is there and the kid is shown throughout the year and throughout his whole career, I don't see why either a bad game, a bad matchup, or it just didn't play well. Ultimately, it should be a referendum on their whole body of work. That's, I think it's a little unfair if you want to put it in terms of like, if somebody here that's listening, they go to work every day and then, they're doing a great job and they're doing the best they can. And then just on a Friday, they have a bad hour and they lose a deal on a sale. Are you now saying this guy can't sell stuff, even though he's our number one salesman? You know what I mean? Like that's right. It's the same mentality, obviously different, different fields, but it's the same type of mentality.
Right. Cause you have that, you talked about wanting to see that pressure of an away game of these, and the tournament is that pressure. And so you have to wonder, is it, and I guess that's just, you have to watch and see, was it the player shrinking from the moment, or was it just a bad matchup or a bad situation? It might. And then how much do you penalize them? Maybe that they weren't ready because again, they're 19. Usually the lottery guys, the top guys are at worst sophomores. Very rare for like an upperclassman to be drafted in the top 5 or whatever. So it's interesting. So I just want to make sure that whoever's listening, if you do have questions, we're going to get to them hopefully in the last 15, 20 minutes. So put in your questions now. I see that there are a couple in there. Don't be shy and drop them in. Okay, so I think at this point, I want to get your mock for the lottery. So I'm going to need our Jordan to help put that up and get it on the screen. And if you are listening in podcast form at a later date, I'm just going to read off who you have up here. You should be able to see if you're watching this, but Houston, number 1, Jabari Smith. Oh, I guess that's the team. Okay, so projected Houston. I'll just go with the players.
Yes.
Jabari
We're
Smith,
going on
Auburn.
current records. Right. Obviously, this
and the lottery
team changes. Tomorrow.
And I'm sorry if I butcher names, guys. Chet Holmgren, number 2, 3, Paulo. Is it Banchero or Banchero?
Sounds good both ways.
All right. 4 is Jaden Ivey. 5 is Keegan Murray. 6 is Benedict Mathurin. 7, AJ Griffin from Duke. 8, Johnny Davis, Wisconsin. 9, Blake Wesley, Notre Dame. Shaden Sharp from Kentucky. Jalen Duran, Memphis. We're at 11. 12 is O'Shea Agbaji from Kansas. How did I do? Close? Close. I don't know.
Close
I'm
enough.
sorry if I butcher this stuff. 13, Jeremy Sochan, Baylor. And then 14, Jaden Hardy of the Ignite. So there's a couple of questions I'm going to have that I'll get to if you don't talk about, but how did this come together? How did you put this together?
Yeah. So obviously this is, this will change based upon one team's, obviously once the actual draft, once the lottery happens, we'll get a better idea of who they are. Some of this is fit. Some of this is talent. I'm always, I guess I'm more of a Bill Belichick thought, draft the best player, right? Draft the best player and then move on from there. Unless the only caveat for me on that is if I have Kevin Durant, I'm not going to draft a guy who is playing like Kevin Durant. You know what I mean? I'm just using Durant as an example. Or a guy, maybe it's the same position. Gonzaga actually had an issue with that with Timmy and Holmgren this year, in my opinion. And maybe they don't think so. I mean, they had a great year, but ultimately, if Timmy's not there, does Chet have more touches? Does he have more freedom? Does he have more movement? Is the floor more spaced? You know what I'm saying? Because in the NBA, the floor is going to be way wider. And, you have Timmy down there playing high-low and playing at the block. And it's how does that change? See, all those things matter. So that's why watching the teams over and over and seeing the personnel, for example, with Auburn, their guards, the guard play wasn't as good as probably most teams in that conference. You know what I mean? But they have a guy out here who's, arguably the best player in the draft. So, how does that affect him? How does that work? Jaden Ivey had these big plotting bigs, to play with. And is he going to have those in the NBA? I don't think he is. He's going to have the worst type of guy he's going to have is like Juancho Hernan Gomez, those types of bigs. Like that's not a bad thing, And right. So obviously this for me changes and not in the sense of, hey, this guy moved up and he's like, oh my God, I'm having an emotional go about it. He jumped out of the gym at the combine. He did this, he did that. Really, when guys move on my board, it's because I either found new information, I discovered something personally that I don't like, or something comes up, or they've done something to disprove what they've already proven, if that makes any sense. A guy, I don't know, he argues with a guy, in a game. Some people would see that as something, or, there's a lot of stuff that can happen between when they declare and the actual draft night, as everybody knows. That's the fun part about the draft, right? Trying to figure out
for sure
where everybody's going because of why. Go ahead.
Well, so it's interesting because there are a couple of players on here that are different from the others, specifically Shaden Sharp and Jaden
What do you
Hardy.
mean the others?
The other players on this board, I'm saying. So you've got 14 players. One of them plays for the G League Ignite, which is obviously not college. And The other one, Shaden didn't play this year. Am I correct?
Right.
Right. So how do you evaluate someone like Shaden Sharp, who's not playing at all, and Hardy, you're seeing him play in a different setting in the Ignite? Is that it's just different information? It's not bad or good.
Guys that don't play, the guys that have issue, or like, I always use this, and like Kyrie Irving. Remember at Duke, he played 5 games or something like that. It was really nothing. You watch those games, it's like, I didn't learn anything about him. So you go on what you can find. And then it's a lot of it, like those guys that you don't have a body of work on, is you have to find out who they are. You know what I mean? Like that's the biggest thing, the character at that point. I mean, any of these guys have a physical liability. If they get hit by a car, it's over, if they bust their knee, it's over. So that's not so much it, but a guy like Jaden Hardy, by the way, he has a full body of NBA work. You know what I mean? Like he's right. I watched pretty much every possession of his this year. I think, there was one game I didn't watch of his. Then I will obviously watch that. But like, if we want to talk about Jaden, like he September, maybe you would have said he's a top 3 pick in the draft, and then he goes to the Ignite and it shows some of his weaknesses. And, those guys are taking a risk, obviously, because if you go in the G League, you're playing against grown men for the most part, and there's G League vets too. Don't forget that G League's been around so long now. You have G League vets, guys who are career lifers, lifers in the G League, and they know how to play. They're just, they just haven't gotten their shot, or maybe they're just not good enough, but he's playing against grown men, and right. Some of his flaws show like his strength at the rim, his finishing with his left. Like there's a lot of stuff that, his float game. Where's the float game? I'm just giving examples here. I'm not trying to break down the scout for anybody. I'm just giving an example of what I'm thinking when I'm going through this. He has obvious talent and he can shoot it, and he has a good feel. But for me, a year ago, I might have had him at 6, but now after a year of watching him and seeing him, I'm like, he's a lottery pick still, but I know his flaws. And it's, in EP, it's kind of a backward process, isn't it? You want to know what you're getting into right away. And a lot of times we draft guys on not knowing what they're going to be at all. Like you just right. don't know sometimes. Like, and I'll use Kyrie just because everybody knows him and it's a pretty easy one to follow. Like you knew in high school he could finish, like he was probably the most elite finisher. I mean, I've heard stories about how he went and worked out at Texas A&M. And this is the type of work I'm talking about. Like when you're as a scout, like you're trying to find this stuff, right? He went to an open gym or something like that at Texas A&M. And I think that A&M team had DeAndre Jordan and all these other, I think Middleton was on that team too. Like, they had some dudes on that team. Mm-hmm. And I guess he came in and just dominated. And it wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. And it wasn't one guy who said it. It was 3. 3 guys said it wasn't even close. This guy's every bit that you need. And that's the type of information, I think, where if people are serious about wanting to do evaluations and things like that, that's network. That's your network. Right. There's guys and there's scouts in this league that aren't, I'll be honest, they may not be the best actual like player analysis, player evaluation, which is fine. Everybody has their strengths, but their network is so deep and their network is so accurate that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And there's just so much value in that.
It's an interesting contrast with Hardy and Sharp because like you had Hardy in maybe 3 or 6 or wherever you had him, and then you got the chance to see his flaws because he played. Whereas Shaden is kind of in that, maybe ignorance is bliss kind of thing. I mean, I remember when Moutier came in, he didn't play much. He was playing overseas and had some injuries there, so he didn't play much. And then, so there was some question as to how good he would be. I guess we could also talk about like Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga last year, I think in early mocks, again, I go off of mocks that are public because I don't really scout myself. But let's say he was top 4 or he fell a little bit. He didn't fall crazy, but he dropped a little bit because he was, I don't know about exposed, but same kind of thing with Hardy where there's a bigger library of information to kind of nitpick over. But Jalen Green's been a very good rookie. I think maybe especially last month or two, he's really shown what he can be. And then Kuminga I think recently he was moved to the starting lineup over Looney. I don't know if that's a permanent change or what. But like I've seen, it took a while for him to get going, especially on a veteran team, and there was some injury stuff. But I wonder if that maybe even helps on Hardy, where it's like, yeah, there were some flaws in Kuminga, but that's because we just got more information, and maybe we've seen how good the Ignite has been. Maybe Hardy is going to end up a better player because of it. We're nitpicking. I don't know. I'm just sort of,
well, that's like the catch 22 of this, right? You want to see more of the guy, and then all of a sudden he's not as good as you either want him to be, thought him to be. And that's where confirmation bias, like that's a big thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, most players, everyone has flaws. There's not anyone who doesn't. There's no player. I mean, LeBron and KD and Kyrie, like we could talk about all of what they don't do well. And it may be a very short list, but there are things that they're not as good at. And obviously you're going to take LeBron number one every time. But
not hard. That's the easiest thing in the draft to do. Like when the Pelicans took Zion 1, that wasn't hard, and I know you can look at it in hindsight. That's not the hard part. The hard part of the draft is not who's the best player. And I think, that's what gets clicks, and that's what everybody likes, and that's what they want, but if you're actually looking at this as you want to do a career path, that's the easy part. The easy part is saying Zion is good. You know what I mean? It's easy to say, that Blake Griffin was good. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what you're ultimately saying. That this guy, he's an NBA player. He's good. I'm taking him 1. It's not hard most of the time.
So then the challenge is, okay, well, the tournament happens. We get through the Final Four. We'll get our last bit of detail on these players. And then as far as structure, then you go to, players have officially declared, they get agents or whatever. There's a withdrawal deadline where some guys go back and don't stay in the draft. So that'll obviously change your top 75 or whatever it is. And then it gets to the interviews and workouts that are specific with teams where they fly guys in and they work out. Maybe it's 3-on-3. Sometimes guys will just do one guy versus a chair. You know what I mean? But how does that play in those kind of things into the equation?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag of that. It's not exactly a perfect science because there's a lot of teams, once their season is over, they start draft workouts. Like, they're allowed to. It's perfectly legal. Once, like, the day that you're allowed to, they do. And there's people that put their name in the draft, and then they say, well, I'll keep my eligibility and whatnot. And then they'll go to X amount of workouts. And if they get feedback that says, hey, I'm not ready, or, it's ABC, then on that withdrawal date, they can come back, then they go out. So you have teams that do draft workouts. There's teams, and I'm not going to name them, obviously, but there's teams that do 12 a week, and you don't hear about them because there's no need to, because they're second round guys, or they're late first guys, or maybe they're just guys that they want to get a look at, or maybe they didn't hear, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference there. And in those workouts, the workout itself to me is not where it's at in the workouts. I mean, yeah, obviously you want to get the information that you get from your strength coaches and your medical staff on that player. I think is like maybe the most important thing that you can get is that information. And then after it, obviously, is the interview. You want to talk to the kid, and you want to talk to the player, and you really get a feel for him. You know what I mean? And I think that's where, if any of you listening are ever, blessed enough to run a team, I think that's where you got to have some personable people that are relatable, people that on your staff. So when you do almost like an interview, like you're literally interviewing, but someone who maybe it's one person, maybe it's two people, maybe it's a group of people that play off of each other. However, you would do it. I've always valued the ability for player evaluators to be able to be great interviewers and ask questions that make the player think and get him off script, because he has a script from his agent and from his PR people if he's a higher end pick, or from maybe his coaches back at college, or maybe he heard something. And I've always valued, personally, people that are able to, in that interview process, get them off their mark a little bit, not in a bad way. I want to crack the egg and open up and see what's really inside,
Yeah. Yeah. One interview technique that I have as a journalist, which is obviously different, is sometimes asking the same question twice, because they've got like a canned answer to that. They've been prepped on that question. And then when you repeat the question, it's worded slightly different, but more or less the exact same question. Now they're like, I can't just say the same thing. And it kind of throws them off a little bit. And you might get a more honest answer. I mean, that's like, as a journalist, that's the goal, is when I'm doing an interview, is to get to the truth of what they're saying and not get a prepackaged kind of what they want to, how they want to look, how they want to come off, which all of us, if you've ever done a job interview, you want to come off like you're a saint and that you're a genius and that you're perfect. And that's not, that's not reality, because that's just not any of us. Some of us are maybe a little more than others. So you mentioned early on in the mock about fit, and how you we put up our players, and you kind of said, you're making the mock kind of on what the other teams will do. How much intel can you get when you're with a team on what other teams are actually going to do? Because you're projecting what they'll do. Is that an internal projection? Is that based on intel?
It's a little bit of both. I'm not going to, reveal every secret, but obviously, but it's a hodgepodge of, one, internal thought, two, intel gathering throughout the year, like just talking to people and getting feels, and then making sure that your scouting department can see on film and in person when they go see these, the other teams in the league. They can literally see what the coaches are trying to do. I've always liked, personally, I've always liked guys who pro guys who know plays and know like schemes and think, you know what I mean? Like I've always like, those are the guys I love picking brains the most, because they see it. You know what I mean? They're seeing it right on the floor as it happens.
Yeah. I've talked to someone who, well, I guess I could say someone with the Celtics, without revealing too much, who they took Tatum. They were at 1 and they traded down to get Tatum at 3. Yeah. And that's if Tatum was always their guy, which he was, that was in theory a pretty momentous risk if they believed that was their guy. But they had the intel that, I guess, was that the year that was it Fultz who went 1 and then to Philly. And that was what the trade was. And then the Lakers took Lonzo. So I had been covering the Lakers. I was pretty confident that Lonzo was their guy. So I don't think that intel was crazy, but you didn't know for sure. But obviously they had to get some level of intel. But outside
story
of that,
on that, can I tell you a story on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So for anybody listening, this is just exclusively for you if you're listening. So funny story. I don't even know if it's funny. It's really smart. It shows how smart and open Danny Ainge is to opinion, right? To an extent, obviously. Apparently they had Markelle in for, just come in, talk to us. We have the number 1 pick. We were interested in you. Yada, yada, a whole lot of yards. And I guess there was some stuff going on. I'm not going to get into specifics, but, just the way he stood and the way his body worked just from walking. Like, this is the type of stuff like they figured out about him by he literally stood, went to dinner. I think he went to dinner or lunch with Danny, and he took a tour of the facility. It's very formal, but this is like the secret sauce stuff. And I don't know if they do it in, obviously anymore, but they realized that his body mechanics were off just by him being observed, walking, how he moved, his feet when he stood. Like, those are like, this is like the hard stuff. And it's interesting that at the end of the day, they didn't take him and they traded it. And that was actually a big reason why was there. The staff was like, you can't look at him. The health staff was saying you can't take him. Look, he's just standing here and his feet are, like this. And for anybody that is watching, see what I do with my hands. But it just added to the conviction they had based upon the information they had, So it's even little stuff like that literally is a chain that from what I understand, and again, I'm sure you can ask other people there, but from multiple people that I spoke with, was 100% the way it went. Like, they were open to Fultz. They were saying, okay, let's get a feel for him. And literally medical staff said, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, he's had significant injury issues, unfortunately. So that was,
that just goes to show you the brilliance of having a really good team. And that's not just the scouting department. That's the medical people, and that's the equipment guys. Like the whole team is super important in the draft process. And I think sometimes it gets lost in translation, and I think some people don't value those little tidbits of information that the equipment, like for example, the equipment manager in New Orleans I worked with, David Jovanovich, big shot. He's been in the league 30 years. He's seen it all. You know what I mean? Like if you're not using that piece of information on guys, maybe he sees stuff or hears stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's, and I'm not saying Big Shot would do that. I'm just saying like there's guys who see stuff, and I think sometimes, if anybody's in here and they're ever running a show, like use everything. And you don't want to get so much information where you're overwhelmed, but I think there's a place for, hey, what have you heard? What have you heard? Or send your number one guy or number two guy, or maybe what it is, and just say, what's going on? And what have you heard? What do you think? You saw him today at the workout. What do you think? So,
yeah, I can say that they've even asked people like us in the media, like they want a media reaction. I would say most of my coverage of the draft was in that stretch where the Lakers had a lot of lottery picks. That was where I got to see a lot of those guys up close. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was working more of a beat that was day-to-day Lakers. So I got to see like the workout. They show us the last 15 minutes of the workout. Most of it would be just nonsense, but they showed us the last however many minutes of Julius Randle working out with Mark Madsen. Mark Madsen had retired at that point, but maybe he was 3 or 4 years off of his career. Still really,
he can still move enough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like watching Julius, like who was, fresh out of Kentucky, how big and strong he was. Like, okay, he already is coming in with NBA strength. Yep. And I could kind of feel the buzz of just talking to the team. And like, they're not supposed to reveal anything, but like after a while, I kind of like, after I saw Larry Nance and after his workout, like I could see there was something that they were talking about him that apparently his athleticism in person would wowed them to see that was something that really moved him up on their board, because they saw like, okay, this guy's way more athletic than we realized. But those kind of things, and then there's, they want to see like, how does that person interact with us, the media? Because you're seeing a different side of their personality when they're talking to a group of people, if it's like 20 people with mics in the face, and how do they react to that? And I don't know how much that factors in.
To me, what matters to me is when you have the microphones in your face, it's 10 days in a row. After 10 days in a row of it, you're going to get pretty sick of it, probably, especially if you're losing. So it's a compilation of things. Most colleges protect their guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
They mostly protect them to, they're kids. You know what I mean? Like they didn't take PR training. Right. They haven't been in the media for 10 years. Like they don't,
especially top of the lottery are usually 19, 20, it's usually
and they just got a crash course by their agent 3 weeks ago,
All right. So we're going to go to Q&A, but is there anything specifically that we've mixed? I know that we've basically said that, the Final Four matters, but from your point of view, it's not the decisive criteria. Is there anything?
No, obviously, I mean, Final Four, you want to see these guys play, and you want to see them live up to their, skill level. And I always wish success on people. Obviously, I don't want any of them to lose. I want them to be successful, because that's a special thing. Like you don't always go to the Final Four. You know what I mean? You don't always win a championship or play in the championship game. Like I remember I went to Villanova one time, I think it was a year after they won their first title. And I remember I was talking to Jay Wright. It's great. Jay's great. And, I was just talking to him, and then I just kind of started listening to the players, just hanging out, watching practice, doing whatever. And, I realized that, especially in my younger days, I could be real harsh. You know what I mean? Like you can be real harsh with guys. He can't do this. He can do that. There's a lack of, human element to it. And I don't know why, but when I was at that Nova practice, for some reason it hit me. I think it was something Jay Wright said to me. I'm paraphrasing. It's something like, it's great being able to be a person with them and experience that with them as a person. It's just something along those lines. It kind of dropped on me that he wasn't fluffing either. Like, he really meant it. And from a scouting standpoint, it always made me go, you know what, you need to make sure that you're never like taking the human element out of it when you're scouting and whatnot. You always want to say, hey, I'm happy for these guys, man. Like all the Duke, Carolina guys, like, the Kansas guys, like, excuse me, like, I'm happy for you. I'm happy. And, when they come in for their interviews, first thing that I would always say to them was, hey, man, I really enjoyed watching you, I always had something prepared where I had little notes, and, I always tried to pride myself on knowing as much as I could. Obviously, I tried to know everything. And it would always be like, hey, you remember, I tried to do something real specific, and like Wayne Selden one time, I said something about he had a game against Baylor, I think it was, or maybe it was Texas. I can't remember, but it was, at the time, it was a big deal for him. It was kind of his coming out party. And I just wanted to tell him that I was happy for his success and, happy for that. I think there's something to be said for, humanity rather than just being, this guy doesn't do this, he doesn't do that, he's this. I think there's something to be said for it.
Yeah, the humanity of it is important. I mean, as I've grown older in life and have children who are in their teens, at some point you realize, like, okay, these kids are closer to my kids' age than they are to me. That obviously is grown. Now it's like my oldest is in college, so it's they're equivalent more or less. So yeah, it's easy to forget the human element. And when I talk about players, it's important to treat them like, understand their people, and that these are young adults. I mean, they're not kids, but they're kids too. Yeah,
they're kids. They should be like, I'm thinking back when I was 18, 19, I'm showing my age now, 20 years ago. I didn't know the difference between anything. I was just kind of winging it, saying, hey, hopefully it works, and, work hard, have a great attitude, and hopefully things work out for you. Right.
All right.
And work as hard as you can. But yeah, I think that's one thing, and maybe it's not what anybody wants to hear in here, but I think, because you never know if anybody's in here, you're listening to this, that you already have a flicker, if you will, for player evaluation and wanting to do something like this. And like, it goes a lot farther if you're genuine and you say, hey, player X, when you go to their game, or maybe you see them out there, whatever it is, I really appreciated that you did this, or it was great. I really got a lot of enjoyment out of your success, or, just something to let them know that you're human too.
Right. For sure. It's a challenge. And especially when I would see them in the workout process with the teams, they might be flying and seeing like 6 teams over the course of a very short period of time. And just the travel of that and the grind of that can be a little overwhelming. But let's jump on into the Q&A section. Our first question comes from Josh Hairston. I might screw up some names. If I do, let me know. But Josh asks, do you believe Duke has a chance to have 5 guys drafted in the first round?
Do they have a chance? Yeah, everybody has a chance, but no. I think that's hard to do. 5. I'm wondering who your 5th is. If you could type it in, I'd like to know who your 5th is. 4? Yeah, I think 4 is like very doable. 5, who's the 5th?
Well, I don't know
if Josh is still here.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that in the chat. Let's go on to the next question. This is Max Rosenberg. And he is asking, Dan, do you believe into the Chet hype? I feel like his game has almost regressed slightly against better competition the past year at Gonzaga. I get drafting on potential at times, and he sure shows flashes, but is it sustainable?
In my opinion, I think Chet's a staying power. I think the biggest thing with him, one, he's super young, and he's his frame can get filled out more from a physical standpoint. I think his game's ultimately going to develop more outside than it is inside. I don't feel like he's a rim running big. You know what I mean? He's got too many skills. I think you can put him at the elbow. I think you can run him at side pick and roll. I think you can get him on the second side. I think if you could get Chet in the second side, obviously if you draft in top 3, you want him, primary. But I mean, he can do a lot of things with the defense moving. And I think that it goes back to what I was saying about Gonzaga earlier with Timmy. It can shrunk the floor. You know what I mean? These guys are playing high-low a lot of times. And I'm just like, that's not exactly his his strength. I think if he can get to a team that can let him have a little space and put some shooters around him, I think he's going to be really, really good for a long time. And by the way, I think Josh said Wendell Moore. Yes, Wendell Moore is the first round pick, in my opinion. Yes.
Do you think Chet defensively? I mean, some people think he could be, a force defensively. How do you think he'll translate on that end?
Well, force is relative, right?
Right.
I think I think he's big enough to be a rim protector. I think he's going to have trouble with strong guys. I think he's defensively in the pick and roll. He has a lot to learn. A lot of times he has his hands down. He's not in a stance. He doesn't have strong hips. The biggest thing for me is getting his core, his hips, his hamstrings, his quads, his adductors, things like that. Like NBA ready. I don't know that his body is NBA ready.
Right.
And I think but he's so skilled. I mean, he's so skilled. He does so many things at 7 feet tall. Like that. I know, especially if I'm choosing him, I know already I have a strength team and a physical therapy team in place that is going to make sure that he gets what he needs. And I also have a nutritionist on staff. You know what I mean? Like I have all the tools. The body is not one of the things that I would sit there and worry about, unless it's like a Fultz thing where it's actually like he has that they would tell me that he has issues. He literally has chronic issues.
Right. Makes sense. All right. Thank you, Max. We're going to go to Derek Morris. He says, of course, he's going to use O'Shea. So try to make me say this again. Thinking about an established college player like O'Shea Agbaji, I hope I did all right, at Kansas, how is their potential in the NBA projected and evaluated differently than a prospect who goes one and done in the NCAA or chooses the G League Ignite Overtime Elite route? So we've touched a little bit on that, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's different for everybody. For me, I like guys that have a bit more, history to them, just because I'm able to really, like, as an evaluator, I'm able to see the differences in their year-to-year progression, right? Usually with the freshmen or first-year guys in Europe, or, like Luka, I think was 17 when he was drafted. Don't quote me, maybe he's 18, but yeah, I guess he was 18, yeah. There's a learning curve, and then there's a body curve, and it's tough. I like it. Like for me, I'm a huge Kenrich Williams fan. I loved him out of college. He had, senior, all that stuff, but I knew what I was getting exactly. And as an evaluator, I like knowing what I'm getting exactly, because it helps me. I can take my talent, which is projection. My talent is being able to see what's in front of me and saying, how does that fit to our team, or what team does it fit to? I can then take my talent and apply it to that.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Derek. So Josh Harrison said Wendell Moore Jr. And I think Corey Talaba says the 5 Duke guys: Keels, Moore, Williams, Banchero, and Griffin. So let's go ahead and go to the next question, which is from Trent Buckland.
Oh, sorry, Eric. Corey, I knew who I wanted to know who his was. Just to clarify that. I was well aware of who they were. I wanted to see who Josh's 5th was, because it's that's another thing about this is we talked about 5 players at Duke, and they're all different players. They're all different guys. Which one? And that's a part of communicating and being on a team. If you guys are ever blessed enough to get there, you're able to talk about this with really smart guys who also know a lot about what you're doing, right? So those are the questions that I would ask those guys. Well, who is your 5th, or who is the best, or what do you think about is which of those Duke guys is the guy that you think, if you had to, like you make up scenarios, like if you had to leave one out, who would you leave out? So,
yeah, it's fascinating. Like Conley and Odin played together, and Odin was projected to be what he is, but it was ended up being Conley who had has had the longevity and the great career. Unfortunately, injury. We're going to try to get in the last 2, and then we've got a surprise guest.
Love surprise.
This one. What's up? We've got Larry Kuhn in the house. But let's go ahead and just knock these 2 out. Garrett Nordyke asks, who's a guy you have in the first round this year that you've had the most difficulty evaluating outside of Shaden Sharp?
great question. I might have to pull my whole mock up right now. Garrett, that's question of the day. Man, and you know what? It's going to sound crazy. Garrett, you're probably going to be like, what? Keegan Murray. Yeah.
Interesting.
And he's tough for me because he's tough for me. I don't know who he is at the NBA level because, like, his position and the way he wants to play, you got to be super physical when you get into traffic, right? And you have to be super aggressive most of the time. The way he plays, right? If the way he plays. And there's a passiveness to him that I'm trying to get over. I'll just be honest with you. I know it sounds crazy because he's like a top. I think I have 5'6", somewhere in there. And I think he's way better than he's letting himself believe. And that's why I'm having trouble with him, because is it he hasn't realized how good he is yet? Or is it he knows and he's scared? Or maybe he's afraid of success? Like, these are the questions I have. And it's not always the guy who's 29. It's sometimes the guy who's 5. And I think of Jackson Hayes a few years back, like, is that I was on the fence with him. Like, I loved his athleticism and I loved his spirit and his energy. But at the same time, I'm sitting here going, there's something I can't put my finger on right now. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things for me. And that's for me. That's not for everybody. Some people may think he's the next coming. He's going to be a core player for his whole career. Like, that's fine. But for me, in the way I evaluate people and players, he's been the most difficult for me because I feel like he just wants to bust out and like go at it. And then he doesn't. And I'm sitting here going, I thought that's what you wanted to do. You know what I mean? And that's, you know, that's crazy. I know it's crazy. I know some guys in the chat might be, that's just how it is for me. So I want to see that. And it doesn't have to be guy 22. It can be guy 5.
Thank you, Garrett. That was, I guess, question of the day. And then we're going to go with the final one, which is from Corey Tulaba, I believe. The question is, what is the development plan for a guy like Wesley in the top 10? He showed a lot of raw shot creation skills, but didn't finish at the rim or consistently knock down shots. Yep. Wasn't much of an off-ball threat. Is it a lot of time in the G League?
I think it's a combo, but for me, if the coaching staff needed some information on what I would suggest on him, he gets 100 pick and rolls right, 100 pick and rolls left from the top. I would run personally, like if you guys know pistol sets, we called it 21, you know, things like that, where he gets DHOs, where he's the receiving end of DHOs, turning corners with momentum. He'd get 100 of those each side every workout. So this is every workout. This isn't like once a week. This is literally after practice or before and after practice. And it's repetitive pick and rolls attacking. I would have coaches, preferably a big coach, down in the rim, fouling, pushing, not fouling, hacking, but like, you know, smacks on the arm, getting into his body, forcing him over length. I agree with you that he has those skills. So now it's just a matter of unlocking it. And that's the beautiful thing about the pros. That's your job. You're going. And I would do it every day, literally right side, left side, top of the key, wings, get as many of those as I could get in with him. And then obviously you'd still do your spot shooting and your, you know, if you're looking at a player development type, you know, book on him.
All right. Well, Dan, thank you for dropping some knowledge here today. As I said, this for me, I'm more of the salary cap side of the coin and pro personnel. I know everybody in the league, but I just don't have the opportunity or the time to do what you do. So I rely on someone with that kind of knowledge, and we're excited to see what students we can develop who can learn from you in Sports Business Classroom. Larry, you want to jump on in and tell everyone what's going on?
Well, hey guys, I'm just here to find out if, you know, the Final Four impacts an NBA's draft board, or in other words, do I need to watch the Final Four?
Well, I think the ultimate answer from Dan was it's not a very big part of the equation. It is part of the equation.
It's a part.
Cool. I just reclaimed some time back. Because I was shocked to find out they even play basketball in college. I just thought that they show up in the pros ready-made, just from birth.
Don't skip steps, Larry. You still watch it. Don't skip steps.
All right. No. Well, thank you guys for putting on the webinar. What I am here to do is talk about Sports Business Classroom, because if you like what you heard here, if you like the depth of analysis and insight, you are going to want to come to Sports Business Classroom. There is our graphic. So we are back live. Again, we missed 2020 live, but we were back live last year. We are back live again this year, immersed in the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Thomas and Mack Arena. You are going to be right there in the arena, which is such a tremendous advantage for us because we get to bring the best of Summer League right there to Sports Business Classroom. We are in the arena. We get to put you to work right there in Summer League. We will dunk you in it like you were a basketball. We are that close to it. So we are July 10th through 15th of this year, again, right in the middle of Summer League at the Thomas and Mack Arena. We have 3 majors to choose from. Everybody gets a lot of everything in the GE section. You get a lot of work to do in the arena, but you also, like a college, pick a major to specialize in. Our majors are the league salary cap, scouting, video and analytics, and media and broadcast. You'll get opportunities for everything, but you're going to specialize with that. This year, we have multiple tiers to choose from. So how much extra stuff do you want added in terms of being able to enjoy Summer League for the weekend before? We give you better access to the Summer League, the opening weekend before the program starts at our All-Star tier, and then we give you even more and more stuff in our VIP and Hall of Fame tiers. Definitely check those out. The very important thing you need to know, like the graphic says, is that our early bird registration closes tomorrow. When April's gone, so is early bird registration, and prices will go up on the 1st. So if you're interested, and by God, who wouldn't be, if you are here, if you know what we do in that program, if you talk to other students, talk to us, you want to be there. So get your application in by tomorrow, because on April 1st, this is no April Fool's joke, it will cost you more. We'll still accept your application, but you want to save the money. So get it in. You want to go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com to register. Again, that's sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Hit us up. There's a number there. If you have any other questions, get your application in, and I hope to see you there.
Thank you, Larry. I can't emphasize enough how great the program is, and Larry is a huge reason why. He brought me in 2016, and it's absolutely my favorite time of year. So if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm very easy to find. I'm on Twitter at Eric Pincus, EricPincus, and I'm happy to have any conversations that you need to have to help make this decision. And if you're going to do it before April, because it's going to cost less. So why wouldn't you do it then? So, all right. Well, hey, Dan, thank you for dropping your knowledge, as I said, and thank you to everyone here for attending. And I guess, Larry, I think that's it. I think we're done for the day.
Good seeing you guys. Thanks again. Thanks to everybody for showing up.
Again, everybody, thanks for your time.
Thanks to the guys at Hall Pass for putting on the webinar as always. Yep. And again, sportsbusinessclassroom.com, July 10th through 15th.